What would you do if your partner confessed to cheating, then demanded a divorce? In this story, the tables turn in a way no one saw coming. You'll want to hear every twist. It was a Monday morning, and we were sitting at the kitchen counter. We had just wrapped up breakfast. I was sipping my coffee and flipping through the daily newspaper. My wife, Clara, said, "Jake, put down the paper. I need to talk to you." I lowered the paper onto the table. "I'm leaving you, Jake. I want a divorce." "Is that all?" I muttered, picking the paper back up and flipping to the sports section. "I'm serious, Jake." I ignored her, and she grew irritated. "Damn it, Jake, put down that stupid paper and listen to what I have to say." "I don't have anything to say except goodbye. It's not like I'm losing much. You haven't been a decent wife for over a year, so go ahead." I tossed the newspaper down, stood up, and went into the room I used as my home office. I grabbed a notebook and pen from my desk drawer and retrieved an envelope. Returning to the kitchen table, I sat down and scribbled on the top sheet, "Mark, thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank God she's finally leaving." I was about to slip the note into the envelope when a thought hit me. I reached into my wallet, pulled out one of the lottery tickets I had bought the previous evening, and placed it in the envelope. Then, I added to the note, "Maybe if you're lucky enough to win, it'll be enough to keep the cheater satisfied, so she won't go looking for someone else. Good luck, kid. You're going to need it." I signed it, a very relieved Jake. I folded the paper, tucked it into the envelope, sealed it, addressed it, and handed it to Clara. "When you see him, give him this." She took it, her face frozen in disbelief. "Just because you think I'm clueless doesn't mean I am," she said, her voice sharp. "Maybe," I replied, snatching the envelope back from her. "I think I should mail it myself." "I don't trust you won't open it, read it, and then throw it out. Why don't you go pack your things and get out of my life already? And since you're leaving, make sure you're out of the house as soon as possible." "I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving just so you can move her in." I stood, poured my coffee into a travel mug, and headed out to work. On the way, I stopped at the bank, closed our joint savings and checking accounts, and emptied our safe deposit box. Afterward, I headed to another bank near my office and opened new accounts solely in my name. Then, I canceled all our joint credit cards and ordered new ones under my name. Once that was done, I got back to my regular routine. After work, I stayed late, had dinner and drinks with my assistant, and mentioned that I was back on the market in case her sister was still interested. Dana chuckled and said, "Forget my sister. If you're single again, I want first dibs." Dana had started as my secretary nearly 10 years ago and proved herself so indispensable that 4 years ago, I promoted her to assistant. To justify it, I made her my executive assistant 2 years back. One Sunday, I threw a backyard barbecue and invited Dana. She couldn't make it because her sister was visiting from out of town, so I told her to bring her along. Her sister, Tina, was a curvy, attractive blonde. That Monday, Dana laughingly told me Tina had a crush on me. I had told her not to mention it to me again since Clara could sometimes be insanely jealous. Now Dana was telling me she had feelings for me. I'd never imagined she'd think of me that way. "All right," I said, half laughing, "then Tina moves to second place, and you can take the top spot." "I'm not kidding, Jake. I'm dead serious." "I really want to give it a shot," Dana replied, her tone completely sincere. I raised an eyebrow. "Dana, you might feel differently when you hear what's on the table." "And what exactly is that?" she asked, leaning in a little. "Well, Clara told me she wants a divorce, so I'm leaving it up to her and her boyfriend. I have no clue what their timeline is." "Her boyfriend?" Dana's eyes widened in surprise. "Yeah, she's been sleeping with this guy for about a year and a half now. I guess she finally realized that sneaking around for a couple of nights a week wasn't enough, so she decided to make it full-time." How long have you known about this? She asked, her voice softening. 1.5 years. Almost from the moment it started. And how did you figure it out? A friend of mine saw her walking into a motel with another guy and gave me a call. I hired a private investigator to tail her for a week, and he got me all the evidence I needed. 1.5 years, and you didn't do anything? Dana seemed astonished. What was I supposed to do? I asked, shrugging. Get angry and wreck my life. In this state, divorces are no fault. That means everything gets split 50-50, and I'd have to sell the house and give her half the proceeds. I'd lose the pool, the hot tub, my workshop, and I'd be stuck living in some crummy apartment. No thanks. I decided it was easier to let her cook, do the laundry, and keep the house tidy. Dana frowned. But how could you live with her, knowing she was cheating on you? You'd be surprised how quickly love turns into hate, I said, taking a slow sip of my drink. And how easily hate can become indifference. I can't believe a guy like you could go 1.5 years without any intimacy. I gave a small chuckle. Who said without? As long as she was willing, I took it. Sure, the frequency dropped a bit, but it still happened. I just didn't touch her on the days I knew she'd been with him. Otherwise, it was the same, except I stopped making love and just had sex. Dana shook her head, trying to comprehend. Do you have any idea why she did it? Not a clue. But I wouldn't be surprised if this wasn't the first time. You think there were other guys? I can't say for sure, I admitted. But in the 10 years we've been married, she's gone through this phase at least 4 times. Looking back, I'd bet anything those other times were for the same reason. If no one had seen her this time, and if I hadn't been tipped off, I'd probably just chalk it up to her going through one of those moods again. Maybe I'm wrong, but at this point, it doesn't even matter. I know for sure about this affair, and that's all I need to know. She's a cheater, plain and simple. So what are you planning to do now? Dana asked. I'm just going to wait. Wait for what? To see what she does next, I said, leaning back in my chair. Now that I've drained the bank accounts, cancelled all her credit cards, and told her to leave the house, she's on her own. She wants a divorce, so she can deal with it. The problem is she doesn't make enough to cover her living expenses and hire a lawyer, so she'll have to get her new man to pay for it. I have no idea if he's willing to do that, but I assume they talked about it before she dropped the news on me. I paused, then added, if you're seriously interested in me, just know you're getting involved with a married man who has no idea how long this divorce is going to take. Dana leaned closer, her voice dropping as if sharing a secret. Jake, you're thinking about this all wrong. How so? I asked, curious. If she files first, she'll be in control. You'll be served, and that could be dangerous. You have no idea what she might claim. She could accuse you of mental or physical cruelty, get a restraining order, and force you out of your own house. You need to be the one making the first move, taking control of the situation. Don't sit back and wait for her to strike. Be proactive, not reactive. I raised an eyebrow. Dana was right. I hadn't considered how quickly things could turn against me if I didn't act first. She continued, besides, you'll be helping me too. Helping you? How? If you wait for her to file, what happens if her boyfriend doesn't want to cough up the money for her lawyer? Then you're stuck, and it'll be a situation of adultery on both sides. And don't think she won't use that against you later. You say she cheated, but she can easily say, so what? You did too. Dana's words were making more sense than I wanted to admit. If I filed first, I'd be in control. I wouldn't have to worry about Clara's next move. If you file for divorce, you're telling the court that the marriage is over from your perspective. Whatever happens after that is legally none of her business. Sure, you'll still be married until the paperwork is finalized, and technically, anything between us could be considered adultery. But no court is going to hold that against you if it doesn't start until after you've filed, Dana concluded. I sighed, knowing she was right. If I didn't take action, I'd be putting my future in Clara's hands. I took a sip of my drink, pondering Dana's words. She made a solid argument. I had seen enough divorces among friends to know how unpredictable and messy they could become. Besides, Dana continued, leaning in closer, you'll be doing me a big favor. I raised an eyebrow. How would that be? Well, if you wait for Clara to file, what happens if she doesn't? What if her boyfriend isn't willing to help with legal fees? That could leave us in a situation where both of you are technically committing adultery, and she could use that against you later. You'll say she cheated, and she'll say, so what? You did too. I leaned back, considering the weight of her statement. She was right. If I took the initiative and filed first, I'd be the one in control. Waiting would only put me at a disadvantage. Dana wasn't done. If you file, it sends a clear message that the marriage is over from your side. Legally, you'll still be married until everything's finalized, but what you do after that won't be her business anymore. Sure, us being together could technically still be considered adultery, but no court will care if it all starts after you've already filed for divorce. I let out a deep sigh, feeling the pressure of the decision closing in on me. Each step in this process felt like another move in a complicated chess game, one I never wanted to be a part of. But Dana's perspective was one I hadn't fully explored until now. So it sounds like I need to stay away from you until I file, or until Clara makes her move, I said, running my hand through my hair, the tension in my shoulders growing. If we wait for her, it could take years. Or maybe just a week. But the point is, she'll be in control, Dana said firmly. If you file first, you could meet with your lawyer tomorrow morning and serve Clara by Thursday. That way, I'll have the weekend to work on winning you over. I smirked, trying to lighten the mood. Winning me over, huh? Dana's expression didn't falter. Her eyes stayed fixed on mine. I'm serious, Jake. What's the point of being first in line if I don't take advantage of it? She wasn't wrong, and deep down, I knew it. So I pulled out my phone and hit speed dial for Josh, my lawyer friend. We'd been buddies since the 3rd grade, and now he practiced family law, what everyone politely calls divorce law. Josh answered on the 2nd ring. Jake, what's up? Josh, I need your help with something legal. It's about Clara. He sighed into the phone. Jake, I'm really sorry to hear that. You know I've always liked Clara, but I'll take care of things as soon as I get to the office tomorrow. Swing by at lunchtime, and we'll get the paperwork signed. Afterward, we can grab lunch and catch up. Before hanging up, I added, there's one more thing, Josh. I need a restraining order. A restraining order, he echoed, his voice surprised. Has she threatened you? She told me that if I caused any trouble with her leaving, her lover, Mark Jones, would straighten me out. It was a lie, and I knew it. But I didn't care. I needed Clara out of the house, and fast. Josh chuckled. All right, I'll file for the order. But you know there'll be a hearing within 10 days, right? I know, I said, nodding, even though he couldn't see me. But the main thing is to get her out of the house for now. We don't have any kids, so there's no real reason for her to stay while the divorce is in process. I'm sticking to the principle of possession being 9/10 of the law. Got it. I'll see you tomorrow, Josh said before hanging up. I looked across the table at Dana, a small smile forming on my lips. So, what do you have planned for me this weekend? I asked, already feeling a shift in the air, like I was finally taking control of my life again. She grinned, her eyes twinkling. Let me lay out my ideas. And as she went on, I couldn't help but think they sounded pretty damn good. When I got home, Clara was sitting at the kitchen counter, sorting through some papers. I barely acknowledged her as I walked over to the fridge, grabbed a beer, and twisted off the cap. Why are you still here? I asked coldly, not bothering to mask my irritation. This is my house too, Jake, she replied, not looking up. I'll stay here until I make other arrangements. If you can't stand being around me, feel free to move out. I let out a bitter laugh. And let you bring your boyfriend here? Not in a million years. She stood abruptly, her face flushed with anger. Sit down, Jake. Let's talk about what we're going to do next. There's nothing to talk about, I said, taking a swig from my beer. I know what I'm going to do, and I couldn't care less about what you have planned. There are things we need to settle, Jake, she insisted, her voice trembling slightly as she tried to maintain her composure. No, Clara, there's nothing left to figure out, I shot back. You said you wanted a divorce, so go ahead and get one. You need to hire an attorney. You need to file the papers. And you'll be footing the bill for all the court costs. I leaned back in my chair and smirked. What I will do is fight you tooth and nail for every single thing. We live in a no-fault state, so everything gets split 50-50. But I'll drag this out as long as possible, just to keep your lawyer fees piling up. You know they don't work for free, right? You want the coffee table? Well, guess what? I want it too. You want the couch? Tough luck, Clara. I've suddenly developed a deep sentimental attachment to it, and I simply must have it. She stared at me in stunned silence, her eyes wide with disbelief. Why all of a sudden, Jake? You didn't seem to care about any of this before. When I told you I wanted a divorce, you didn't even react. All you said was to pack my things and get out. I met her gaze, my frustration bubbling to the surface. That was before I had time to really think it over. I paused, letting my words hang in the air. I let you off the hook the first 3 times because you didn't want a divorce. I loved you enough to keep my mouth shut and stick around because, no matter what, you always came back to me. Her face went pale when I mentioned the first 3 times, and right then, I knew my suspicions had been spot on. It's hard to explain why I stayed with you, I continued, but I never filed for divorce. Maybe I thought I'd done something to make you lash out, and you felt like you had to cheat to get back at me. Eventually, you'd break things off with whoever it was and come back to me. I thought that meant you still loved me, in some twisted way. Clara shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. I could see the guilt weighing on her, but it was too little, too late. I took a deep breath, the truth becoming clearer as I said it aloud. I thought this thing with Mark was just a repeat of the last times, but now I see I was wrong. You're nothing more than a serial cheater. And if it wasn't Mark, it'd be someone else in 6 months or a year. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. I stared at her, waiting for a response, but none came. Finally, I broke the tension. Move your things into one of the guest rooms. And do me a favor, stay the hell away from me. I drained the rest of my beer, tossed the bottle in the trash, and made my way upstairs to what used to be our bedroom. I didn't look back. This was it, the beginning of the end. But at least now, I was the one calling the shots. The next morning, I left the house before Clara even came downstairs. I didn't have the energy for another round of exchanges. I needed space. Space away from her lies and deceit. I stopped by a small bed and breakfast cafe nearby for breakfast. Angie, the waitress who had known us for years, gave me a puzzled look as she approached my table. Where's Clara? I usually see you two together, Angie asked, placing my coffee in front of me. You won't be seeing us together anymore, I replied bluntly. We're splitting up. She paused for a moment, her expression softening. I'm sorry to hear that, Jake. After a beat, she placed the bill on the table, her voice dropping. My number's on the back, she said quietly. Not the restaurant's, mine. I blinked, surprised. 2 women in 2 days had made it clear they were interested. It felt strange, almost unsettling. Maybe it was the novelty of my newly found freedom, or perhaps it was the realization that I'd been living in a broken marriage for so long that I hadn't noticed others looking my way. Whatever the case, it didn't change the fact that none of them, neither Dana nor Angie, meant anything to me right now. And certainly not Clara. I paid the bill and left, heading straight to the office. Around mid-morning, Josh called. "The papers have been filed. We'll serve her at work today, right around 10 a.m., like you requested," he said. I hung up, feeling a mix of anticipation and relief. This was the moment I had been waiting for. My chance to finally take control. As soon as Josh confirmed the papers were served, I called the locksmith. 20 minutes later, he was at the house, changing the locks. It wasn't cheap, but at this point, nothing was too expensive for peace of mind. When I returned home later that afternoon, Clara's car wasn't in the driveway, exactly as I had hoped. I went inside and started methodically packing her belongings, stacking them neatly in the garage. It didn't feel emotional, there was no anger, no heartbreak, just a sense of closure. I was ready to move on. Around 5 p.m., I heard the familiar sound of Clara's car speeding up the driveway. I watched from the window as she got out, her eyes catching the wide-open garage door and the large sign I'd placed there that read, "Clara, all your things are in the garage." She stood there for a moment, staring at the sign before marching up to the front door. She tried her keys, but, of course, they didn't work. After ringing the doorbell several times and waiting outside, she finally turned around and drove off. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Clara's number flashed on the screen. "Jake," she hissed through the line, "what the hell is this? You changed the locks and moved my stuff to the garage. You humiliated me at work with those divorce papers. It's better than humiliating you in front of your boyfriend, isn't it?" I shot back coldly. "What is this restraining order nonsense? You're making everything so much harder than it needs to be." "I was just worried you might ask Mark to come over and rough me up," I replied sarcastically. "That's bull, and you know it. I need to get inside and grab a few things," she growled, her frustration palpable. "All your things are in the garage, Clara. The garage door opener still works. If something you need isn't in there, write me a list, and I'll move it to the garage for you," I said calmly. "Stop being ridiculous, Jake. You're dragging this out unnecessarily." "Sorry, Clara, but causing you a little inconvenience doesn't come close to paying back the years you put me through hell." "Be grateful I didn't lose my temper," I replied, my voice steady. There was silence on the other end before she hung up without another word. I sat back down at the kitchen table, feeling an odd sense of calm wash over me. I began making calls, telling people about the split. Most were shocked to hear that Clara had cheated, but a couple of people weren't all that surprised. 2 conversations stuck out. One friend simply said, "So you finally caught her, huh?" While another admitted, "I always figured you two had some kind of open relationship. She was always out with other guys, and you never seemed to mind. I thought you were okay with it." I mentally crossed those 2 off my friends list. I couldn't stomach the idea that people had known, or worse, suspected, and never told me. Clara's parents were the most affected by the news. They tried to tell me I must be mistaken, that their daughter wasn't capable of such behavior. But I wasn't going to let her twist the story and spin her version to them. I needed to make sure they knew the truth. The next day, Josh called to confirm that Clara had been served. I scheduled another appointment with the locksmith and had the locks changed. This time, it was permanent. By the time I got home, Clara had tried to break into the house through the garage door. The camera footage caught it all, her tearing apart the kitchen, smashing dishes and glasses, destroying several lamps, and, most incriminating, pulling all my clothes out of the closet, piling them on the floor, and urinating on them. Every single malicious act was captured on tape. I called Josh right away, and he contacted the authorities. An officer arrived, filed a report, and took pictures of the damage. The next day, Clara was arrested at work for violating the restraining order and for damaging private property. She was fingerprinted, photographed, and brought before a judge. The judge set a hearing date and released her on her own recognizance. I didn't expect it to escalate like that, but it did. Meanwhile, my date with Dana that weekend went surprisingly well. We arranged another one for Saturday, which turned out even better. On Sunday, we went on a picnic together. It felt like things were finally moving forward, and I sensed a real shift in my life. By Monday, the hearing for the restraining order took place. When the judge reviewed the footage, he made the restraining order permanent and also ordered Clara to replace all the items she had wrecked, pay for the dry cleaning of my clothes, and cover the cost of cleaning the bedroom. She was given 10 days to comply or face jail time for contempt of court. Just to make it more difficult for her, I hired the most expensive cleaning company I could find. I knew it was a bit petty, but I didn't care. Clara deserved it. Unfortunately for me, she managed to scrape together the money and did everything the judge ordered, so I never got to see her face jail time for contempt. In the 2 weeks that followed, Dana and I kept seeing each other. Things were progressing between us, though we were taking it slow. Aside from a few passionate kisses, neither of us was quite ready to take things further. After all, I was still technically married. But that didn't stop the growing seriousness between us. The divorce was finalized within 6 months. It was your typical no-fault divorce, with everything split evenly. I refinanced the house and bought out Clara's share. There was a small victory for me in the alimony battle as well. Clara was awarded only $100 a week instead of the $500 she had pushed for. Josh explained that we lucked out with the judges assigned to the case. Both had gone through cheating spouses themselves and didn't see why an innocent husband should be penalized for his wife's infidelity. 7 months after the divorce was finalized, I heard through mutual friends that Clara had moved back in with her parents. Her relationship with Mark hadn't lasted. 8 months after the divorce, I was sitting in a bar at the Hilton, enjoying a beer and a steak sandwich, when someone took the stool next to me. I mentally crossed off those two from my friends list. I couldn't bear the thought that people had known, or worse, suspected, and never told me. Clara's parents were the most devastated by the news. They tried to tell me I must be wrong, that their daughter wasn't capable of such actions. But I wasn't about to let her twist the story to them. I had to ensure they understood the truth. The following day, Josh rang me to confirm that Clara had been served. I set up another appointment with the locksmith and had the locks changed again. This time, it was final. By the time I got back home, Clara had attempted to break in through the garage door. The security camera footage had it all, her wrecking the kitchen, shattering dishes and glassware, destroying several lamps, and, most shockingly, dragging all my clothes from the closet, dumping them on the floor, and urinating on them. Every bit of her spitefulness was recorded. I immediately contacted Josh, and he reached out to the police. An officer arrived, wrote up a report, and took pictures of the wreckage. The following day, Clara was arrested at her workplace for breaking the restraining order and for property damage. She was fingerprinted, photographed, and taken before a judge. A hearing date was set, and she was released on her own recognizance. I hadn't expected things to go that far, but they did. On the other hand, my date with Dana that weekend was unexpectedly enjoyable. We set up another for Saturday, which turned out even better. By Sunday, we went on a picnic. I could feel a real change happening in my life, a shift in the right direction. By Monday, the hearing regarding the restraining order took place. When the judge reviewed the footage, he made the order permanent and also demanded that Clara replace everything she had ruined, pay for the cleaning of my clothes, and cover the cost of cleaning the bedroom. She was given 10 days to comply or face jail time for contempt of court. Just to make things a little more difficult for her, I hired the most expensive cleaning service I could find. I knew it was a bit petty, but I didn't care. Clara deserved it. To my disappointment, She managed to scrape together the money and complied with the judge's orders, so I never got the satisfaction of seeing her jailed for contempt. Over the next couple of weeks, Dana and I continued meeting. Things were progressing, albeit slowly. Aside from a few passionate kisses, we both held back. After all, I was still technically a married man. But that didn't stop the connection between us from deepening. The divorce was finalized within 6 months. It was a typical no-fault divorce, with everything divided equally. I refinanced the house and bought out Clara's portion. A small victory for me was that she was awarded only $100 a week in alimony, not the $500 she had been pushing for. Josh explained that we got lucky with the judges. Both had experienced unfaithful spouses themselves and weren't inclined to punish an innocent husband for his wife's betrayal. 7 months after the divorce, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Clara had moved back in with her parents. Her relationship with Mark had fizzled out. 8 months after the divorce, I found myself at a bar at the Hilton, sipping a beer and enjoying a steak sandwich, when someone sat down beside me. "Can I buy you a drink?" a voice asked from behind me. I turned and saw Clara's former lover, Mark Jones. Curiosity got the best of me. "Go ahead," I said. He gestured to the bartender and ordered us both beers. He took a sip, set his glass down on the counter, and stared at it for a few moments, peeling the label off the bottle as he began to speak. "I didn't mean to mess things up for you," he said, still avoiding my gaze. "When I met her, she wasn't wearing any rings. I had no clue she was married. She definitely wasn't acting like a married woman." I leaned back in my seat, remaining silent as he started to unravel his side of the story. Mark took another sip of his beer, finally turning to look at me. His eyes were tired, heavy with regret. "The night I met her, she was out with some coworkers. I asked her to dance, and she agreed. We hit it off right away. She told me she was taking care of her sick mom, so we couldn't see each other often. She said she couldn't bring me over because of her mom, and I didn't question it. I figured she was just busy with family." I didn't interrupt him. Everything he was saying aligned with what I had already suspected. Clara had always known how to play the victim card when it worked in her favor. About a month in, we started meeting up more regularly, but we had to use motels since I was still living with roommates. Once I got my own place, I thought things would get easier. I fell for her, man. I was even planning on proposing, buying a house for her and her mom. I thought I had it all figured out. He paused, nervously picking at the label on his beer bottle, his fingers fidgeting with unease. Then someone told me she was married. I couldn't believe it at first. I was angry, but I still wanted to hear her side of the story. When I confronted her, she broke down, crying, telling me you were abusive, that you'd threatened to kill her if she ever left. I almost bought it, but something felt off. So, I did some digging. I raised an eyebrow. "And what did you find out?" "She was lying about everything. I found out she'd had other affairs before me. One of the guys even told me the whole story. Turns out, I wasn't the first guy she'd cheated on you with." Hearing it from him didn't shock me, but it still hit hard. Mark let out a deep sigh and leaned back in his chair. I was ready to end things right then, but, to be honest, she was incredible in bed. So, when you kicked her out, I let her move in with me. It was easy at first, no drama, no strings attached. I nodded, already knowing where this was heading. But after the divorce went through, she started wanting more. She talked about marriage, building a future together. I couldn't go through with it. I told her I didn't believe in marriage after what happened with my parents. My mom cheated on my dad, remarried, then cheated again, 3 times. I wasn't going to fall into that trap. Mark shook his head, his voice quieter now. Once a cheater, always a cheater. That's how I see it. I told Clara that as long as we kept it casual, everything would be fine. But she wanted more. One day I came home, and she was gone. The silence that followed was thick, almost palpable, as we both sat there, processing the irony of the situation. Mark took another sip of his beer before turning to me and asking, "There are rumors going around that you knew all along about us. Why didn't you just divorce her sooner?" I laughed dryly. "You said it yourself. She was fantastic in bed. I figured I'd just get what I could, sex, someone to keep the house running, do the laundry. I knew it was finished between us, but getting a divorce was a headache I didn't want to deal with. When she finally wanted out, I let her go." Mark sighed, then caught me off guard by saying, "I never thought I'd admit this, but I miss having her in my bed." He glanced down at his beer bottle, clearly embarrassed. I didn't bother to respond. I wasn't interested in bonding over shared regrets, especially not about Clara. Mark reached into his jacket pocket, pulled something out, and slid it across the counter. It was an envelope. "What's this?" I asked, eyeing it skeptically. He smiled faintly. "The lottery ticket you gave me. It's a winner. This is your half." He tapped the envelope lightly with his finger. "I waited until your divorce was finalized to give it to you, so you wouldn't have to split it with her." I blinked, genuinely taken aback. I'd completely forgotten about that lottery ticket. Opening the envelope, I found a cashier's check inside, for a substantial sum. A very substantial amount. Mark finished his beer and stood up. "Take care, Jake. I'm sure we'll bump into each other again." He gave me a nod before walking out of the bar, leaving me staring at the check in disbelief. When I got back to the office, Samantha, my new assistant, looked up as I walked in. "You look like the cat that just ate the canary," she teased with a grin. "Was lunch that good?" "Lunch was, surprisingly eventful," I said, tucking the envelope into my jacket pocket. She raised an eyebrow, clearly curious, but I didn't bother explaining. There was no need to unpack the complexities of that meeting. Instead, my thoughts drifted to how much had shifted in the past few months. Clara was gone. The divorce had been finalized. Dana had moved in with me, and we were making plans for the future together. In fact, she was at home right now, painting the room that would soon become the nursery. Twins. We were expecting twins. Life had a funny way of flipping everything upside down, only to set it back upright when you least expected it. As I sat down at my desk and glanced out the window, something dawned on me. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. The storm had passed.